Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode where today I'm joined by a very special guest to talk about some of the WSL drama that happened over the weekend. It is sports journalist as well as writer and reporter for Manchester City, Julia Ranney. Julia, how are you doing today?
I am doing so well. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to chat, obviously, about women's football, but Manchester City is my team. So really on a high right now after a big win.
Good, absolutely. Obviously, if you are not caught up already, the weekend hosted a pretty dramatic Manchetser Derby. It was the first one at Old Trafford with a record crowd for Manchester United. It was not what Manchester United wanted to do and perform at the Theatre of Dreams for them, unfortunately, as they walk away with a 3-1 victory. Opening the scoring was actually captain Katie Zellum over converting from the spot. It was very quick reaction from City as Ruud equalized, Hemp with a beautiful goal, and then to just really clean things off in the second half, it was Bunny Shaw getting on the score sheet and obviously being named the player of the match. Plenty to talk about here, Julia, and I kind of wanted to start things off with the starting 11. Coming into this City, we're obviously recovering from a devastating, one would say, in the words of Gareth Taylor, back-to-back losses to Arsenal and Brighton, which was definitely not what they were expecting to come out against Brighton. But with the starting 11, we saw Greenwood coming back in. How did that look for you? Were you expecting many changes? What was your overall assessment, I guess, and you can weigh on a little bit of what you saw United have be fielded starting in as well for them.
Of course. I mean, right off the bat, I just want to mention that I'm so happy that Alex Greenwood is back
Mm-hmm.
into the starting 11 as well into the lineup. She had a head injury, and head injuries are very scary. So I'm truly thankful and blessed that it didn't last too long because she really is a linchpin. And I think seeing her, of course, the captain coming in today was hugely vital for Manchester City. She's such a calming presence out there, but she's sort of like a mother in the sense of where she demands the best out of everybody on there.
Mm-hmm.
And they know not to mess with Alex, right? So I think her on the pitch today was a huge boost for City, especially going into this derby. But I personally thought the lineup for City was spot on. It was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's their
Mm-hmm.
tried and true players that they've used over and over and over again. Them young, feisty ones like Chloe Kelly. I'm sure we'll chat about her, but I love having her start versus come off the bench. I think she brought a lot to the pitch today. But then having, those players like Coombs and Steph Houghton on the bench to come on in after and just provide that stability, that leadership, that experience that they're known for. So I
Mm-hmm.
think Gareth Taylor really got it right today. And what I think these starting players did, quite honestly, is come in. Obviously, they're playing at Old Trafford. It's a lot of pressure on United. And they just said, hey, we're going to give it our very best today. We deserve, we have more fighting energy considering the fact that we lost. We don't want to lose again. We don't want to lose to United, our rivals. So I think City actually had the upper hand coming into Old Trafford because they had
Mm-hmm.
nothing to lose. And the
Yeah.
starting 11 that I thought United put out there today, I thought they were very hesitant.
I think you definitely saw different energies, like you mentioned, United being a little bit hesitant in terms of what they actually wanted to do. But with City, he trusted kind of the vets that he's been playing. Greenwood getting back in there, like you mentioned, she's kind of like a Steph Houghton number two. She is that leader in the back line. For United, obviously, they were playing Leah Golton in the left back position. Jade Rivera, who we'll touch on at the end of the video, had picked up a knock, so she wasn't able to start. But I think you got a starting 11 that was superb from Gareth Taylor and one that was slightly skewed with players out of position and just not where you wanted your best starting 11 from Mark Skinner. I think the opening 30 minutes were kind of a swing, but I would say that City looked pretty confident. Like they were testing the water, seeing how they can play from the back, and United wanted to catch them on a counterattack. They did have some of those few moments. I think Toon came close to being, very making some important moves in the final third, and they just didn't have it. But for City, I think the back line got exposed a few times again, like despite having good momentum. there was moments where we're like, United can actually go after these pockets, and then before you even know it, you get that penalty, and Katie Zellum all of a sudden got the crowd with her, converting from the spot. Was that just shakiness of, again, getting back Greenwood in there? Was it things that we have repeatedly seen happen and be exposed that still Gareth Taylor isn't able to properly compact? Or was it just the occasion? I guess, how did you see that working out?
For sure. I think it's a little bit of everything you mentioned. I just want to go back really quick to the opening sort of 15-30 minutes, like you mentioned, and then how that would have led into, of course, the first goal for United. But City came out strong. They had 6 shots in the first 11 minutes. I thought their aerial presence was much better than what it usually was. And City's historically had a little bit of an issue converting and getting those shots in the opening 30. So I thought that was really promising to see. And I totally think that just came down to a lot of momentum, to be honest. But when emotions are riding high, when I'm sure the players could feel that things were, teetering in City's direction a little bit, that's where City lose their focus a little bit on the defense, and holes and gaps were very obvious today. But that's something that has been a problem with City's defense for quite some time. I don't think City has a back four right now that is their tried and true four, left to right. I think Gareth Taylor is still kind of playing around with that. There's some age, there's some inconsistencies, so it's hard to say, but I do think that's a place where City can be exposed on defense. And of course, United took advantage of that quite a lot. The penalty, unlucky. I personally just think it's a little bit unlucky. It can happen to both teams, but what can you do? And I feel bad for Greenwood, of course, coming back in off of her injury, and it is what it is. But Katie Zellum, of course, she comes in. She's calm, cool, collected. You knew that was going in before she even took the shot. And honestly, at that point, I was a little bit worried seeing some of the shakiness, some of the players being out of position on the defense. Specifically, I thought, oh dear, this could go in a very different direction. But thankfully, City's, their midfield was strong. They had fight, they had hope, they had power. We actually took our offensive chances this time. And I think that really makes a big, big difference. I just truly think emotions were probably the biggest factor today.
City's biggest enemy has always been themselves, of not finishing chances. Now, thankfully, that wasn't so much of an issue, I guess, in moments where they needed to capitalize on what they were doing. Very quickly, Jill Roord, or I think even before we go to the Jill Roord, I want to give a quick shout out, I feel like, to Philippe Angledal, who is producing some really neat chances in the middle. Can we weigh on a little bit of the midfield, I guess, excellence between Jill Ward, who was, again, the midfielder who equalized things, Angledal, again, almost like a good engine behind that isn't always given the praise she should be getting, and Yui Hasegawa consistently dispossessing the opposition in the middle. How good are those three for City?
I think they're extremely underappreciated. And of course, I am biased being a Manchester City writer and reporter, but they are so underappreciated, especially Hasegawa. She just comes in. I personally think she does what she needs to do. She's quick on her feet. She's very forward thinking. And I think her, Angledal, and Roord have a fabulous, fabulous partnership going on that's almost silent. And it's just seems like they're friends between them, just having a good kickabout on there. But everybody always turns their attention to the big name players, of course, Bunny Shaw, Chloe Kelly. So that's where I think maybe some of these underrepresented players don't get the limelight, but they're the ones who are really setting up the plays. I absolutely agree what you're saying about Angledal. She was fabulous, especially in the World Cup as well. She's very creative. She is a creative player. She's not afraid to hold possession, to push the boundaries of her teammates and, of course, the opposing teams. And I think that opened up and exposed United a little bit, especially when they were already shaken after Jill's first goal.
No, I completely agree. Like, I think things were shaken up a little bit, and given how momentum was already swinging, probably towards City's end, that was kind of the penalty came at a very annoying time. And like you mentioned, it was midfield excellence that kind of had to step it up for City to get the good service up for the three players that we'll get to touch on a little bit. So Ruud gets in a goal. She was probably not going to miss that. It looked like Erbs's vision was a bit blocked. Erbs can really see where Ruud was going. But really quickly, really, really fast, you saw them, again, press really high. And I really want to focus on the press because I feel like that caused United a ton of issues. Not only is that how we saw the second goal happen, but it was also the third one. We know City is really good at pressing. Why do you think sometimes we don't see that effectiveness of pressing across the games? Like, I think they lack consistency of doing the pressing work that they do every single game, game in and game out. Hemp, she can finish from really hard spots. And it's funny, Gareth Taylor came out and said, that was probably the hardest finish of all game. Yeah. Like it was a tough shot, but it's Lauren Hemp magic. Like when she gets on the ball, she can finish stuff like that. Those three, when they work together, when they have the clinical skill set that they do in finishing balls and pressing, like that causes a lot of trouble for teams when it's clicking together.
I agree. And this is one of these questions that I think City has to figure out. It's interesting how you can go from losing 1-0 to Brighton. Of course, nothing against Brighton. They're a fabulous team, but City should have won that game on paper going in. But they didn't bring the energy. They didn't bring the consistency. And I don't think they brought the focus. I think this City women's team, when they're focused and when they're locked in, they can win the WSL. I personally think like if they played today, like they played every single rest of the game for the remainder of the season, they can absolutely win the WSL. But unfortunately, I think it's just that focus that needs to be there all the time. I don't think has anything to do with their technical abilities or their ability to play on the pitch. But sometimes I think just that mental awareness is lacking a little bit. And I don't know why that occurs. I don't know if that's different playing styles due to City having a variety of international players who, of course, play for different countries. That can get a little bit messed up when there's international breaks, of course, players being injured. So I just think today the focus, the awareness was really there. And I'm a huge advocate for off-field sort of representations like mental awareness, like energy versus actual technical ability. I think that can bring teams and players to a whole new level. And that's where we see some of these, big name teams, especially like Chelsea, Barcelona, for example, they're always focused. They're always aware. They almost forget about anything that's happened before and they keep going. See, today City started off strong. Of course, there was the goal from Katie that sort of disrupted their flow, but they were still able to keep their end goal in mind. I sometimes think when things aren't going City's way, they just drain,
Agreed. I think it's a mentality question that usually swings around because, there's proven internationals. I mean, Lauren Hemp and Chloe Kelly, and I think specifically even after the World Cup, they've had a superb season. Can we talk about them always stepping up when we need them to? Like Chloe Kelly sure didn't get on the score sheet, but she was the one who scored against Arsenal, perhaps could have gone a second. Again, occasionally against big teams, she's the one stepping up, and Laura Hemp today did what she needed to do. How important are these players for City, I think, this season and hopefully moving forward, because they definitely don't want to lose their wing attributes of Lauren Hemp and Chloe Kelly, given that they just lost the likes of Haley Rasso in the summer.
Totally agree. These are some of these players that, of course, Chloe Kelly gets on the score sheet a little bit more previously than Lauren Hemp. Obviously, they're both prolific scorers. I'm not sure if it's their experience, obviously, with the Lionesses playing on such huge international stages, if it's their fire inside, if it's their personality. I don't know what that secret sauce is, but these players are tried and true, especially I would just want to chat real quick about Chloe Kelly too. She's one of my favorite players, so I got to give a shout out to her, but
absolutely,
her versatility, she is honestly a true lioness, to bring in that England phrase, but also for Manchester City. She's brave. She doesn't take no for an answer. That shows on her pitch, like with her play on the pitch. She's very pacey today. The fact that her ball knowledge and awareness, her tactical ability, she had almost perfect passing today, exceptional. Her ability to press, obviously drive the defense, to push some of her other players in there. For example, she assisted Jill's goal today by a pure burst of energy up the wing. Sensational. And I think these big game players thrive in big game situations. Where when you think about the Brighton game, they didn't really show up because it wasn't a big game on paper. So I think context is a lot here. And this game really meant something to the City team emotionally as well. And I think those make huge differences in the long run for these special players.
Absolutely. And I think it probably is lessons when you're able to show up against United, you should definitely be showing up against Brighton. And you brought fire here, which makes me think of Bunny Shaw. I think she gave Millie Turner and specifically, I think Maya Leticia, who I rate very highly, a very tough time. She's pressing relentlessly. Bunny Shaw, I guess, after and I'm gonna call this the post Ellen White era, because if it does feel like finally she's getting that shine, and we saw that last season. But this season, I wouldn't say she's dipped in format. It's probably too soon to say, but when you see that fearlessness of literally pressing the keeper to the point that she did against Mary Earps, who is one of the best goalkeepers in the world, you've seen her mess up a little bit between communication in the back. I think this is not to say United had a sloppy game in the back, but you don't have a sloppy game without three players completely and relentlessly pressing you for the 90 minutes. But for Bunny Shaw, she kept going back and forth to Millie Turner, Hannah Blundell, when Golton was still in the back, Jade Revere when she came on. She does not stop. I mean, her engine is just miraculous, isn't it?
It's incredible. And I had actually the opportunity to interview Bunny Shaw when I was with you, Miriam, when we went to see the Canadian women's national team play Jamaica at BMO Field in Toronto. And what immediately struck me, and I think this is what's so interesting that people don't get to see on the television or laptop screen or whatever you're watching from, is she is strong. She is physical. She's tall, broad-shouldered. You're kind of when you're in her presence, you feel like you're in the presence of a goddess, truly. You feel very small. You feel a little bit intimidated and nervous, I think. So I couldn't even imagine what it would be like for defenders to go up against Shaw, just purely from a physicality perspective. So give a lot of credit to the defenders, of course, who do go at her, but Bunny is known for scoring goals. She's known for finding the net. She hasn't had as many goals so far this season as what she's had at this point in years past, but that's okay. Like we mentioned, it's still early on, but I think she is made to be a striker. She's made to be physical. She's made to be intimidating, and just, again, riding on these emotions combined with the fact of how strong she is, how quick. She's very quick on her feet. Very locked in at all times. Yeah. Of course, we see that press. She doesn't give in. She doesn't take it from anybody. And if she's pressing up there, if she's going to hold it as high as she can. That's her job. She knows that's what her job is. And she takes that extremely, extremely seriously. So I want to see more of that moving forward. She also had a bit of an injury knock earlier, so maybe she's coming back from that. I'm not sure. This is where there's a little bit of inconsistencies with City's lineup from an injury perspective. But today she looked fit. She looked clean, ready to go.
She uses a lot of her physicality, and that's what I love about her. Like, she's a fit, strong player that doesn't make silly tackles. Like, usually when you see big physical players, they're on with a red card and a yellow card every single game. She's very smart, but we did see a red card, which unfortunately has been the story with City for one too many games. You probably remember that Chelsea game, which could have its own episode. But how can City again have to bounce back and deal with another red card? Now she's going to be out for, I think, 2 or 3 games, depending on I think it was a double yellow, so probably 2 games. But this is yet another red card that they have to deal with. We saw how not difficult it was at the start, but again, Gareth Taylor had to do a lot of changes. They have a great bench, a deep bench, but this is again another tough obstacle that they have to work around, and they've got Spurs next weekend, which is not an easy opposition to go up against.
No, and Layla Alexandri, who got the card, she's obviously one of the other linchpins on City. I love her versatility. I love her awareness, and again, her personality. She's fabulous addition to this Manchester City women's squad. And of course, it's yet another disruption for City. We've seen a variety of red cards, I think it's funny at this point. I just have to laugh, because if I don't, I cry. So we can't do that. But
Yeah.
I think now this city DNA, sorry, is very much of a bounce back mentality. We fight till the end mentality. And I actually think, in a weird way, having some of these moments, like getting these red cards where a city is required to be versatile, where a city is required to be adverse, is actually going to help them in the long run. Because multiple players will eventually be able to step into different positions. Maybe bringing in Kaspari or Coombs or something in her spot, I think, is a great opportunity for some of those, like you mentioned, deep bench players. But I'm trying to see it as a positive, of a way for them to build versatility, creativity, and just a fighting edge, and trying to see it from that perspective. Of course, it's unfortunate, Alexandria was just trying to stop a play, but it is a foul. It is a foul, and you have to accept that and move on. But it is what it is, right?
Yeah, what I like with a lot of the City fouls, that a lot of them were not up for debate. Like that hand from, handball from Greenwood was just a clear handball. There was no debate. There was no like, oh, VAR it, but there's no VAR. Like this one, it was a clear second yellow card. So I do very much enjoy how there's not a huge discourse about officiating. We did see obviously that disallowed goal from Jay-Z, but it looked like he was out, and if it wasn't out, it would have been a corner for United anyway. But now that we just touched on a little bit of Spurs, and I very much enjoy how your perspective is, this is probably going to benefit them in the long run. And I think towards the end of the season, when it's players are probably exhausted, they're tired, the bench is dealing with a lot of knocks, you want to use that adaptability, those different players that can play in different positions. City can't lose another game. And I think Gareth Taylor has been quite, he said that, and he's put on a lot of pressure on himself and the players to not lose a single game, which is a very scary thing to thought, given that if we're very early in the season, but it also feels like so much has happened already.
Yeah.
What do you think City should do and continue doing, or change, or whatever it is that you feel like must be done in order for City to make sure that they're definitely competing in the cup games of the FA Cup and the Conti Cup, because that is a great trophy run that they can go on, but as well as making sure that they don't lose crucial games heading in the rest of the season, to make sure they're clinching that top 3 spot, possibly making a run for the WSL title.
Yeah, I think City, one thing that just jumps out to me is having more confidence, taking those chances, of course, on attack. Before today's game, they were second from the bottom in the WSL for chances converted, which is abysmal, considering that now they're ranked 3rd in the standings on the table. So that is extremely low. When we consider the amount of chances City has had on target versus the amount of goals they've had, that is a huge area that can be adjusted. And that's obviously, going to win them games. It comes without being said. Goals win games, of course. So focusing on set pieces on attack, and also then actually finishing and taking advantage of chances when they come. That's going to be huge. I think when we're talking about attack as well, love to see Chloe Kelly's pace up the wing. Reminds me a little bit of Jeremy Doku. Of course, this is in the men's game, but he came in and changed the men's Manchester City side with burst of pace and fire up the wing. City historically hasn't really had that. It's a lot of crafty plays up the middle. Sometimes I think they're a little bit slow on the attack. They take their time. They take their sweet time trying to build up a play. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can overthink. And that's why those chances aren't converted, in one of my opinions. So I think trying to be quicker, faster up to the final third to catch some of these opposing teams off guard. Then, of course, just trying to play around with their defensive lineups. Who's going to be in the right position at what time? Because sometimes players can get jumbled, and then it's an open free for all. Trying to play around with who their best back four is, who plays when and where. But I think big moves need to be made, probably on the conversions.
And I think January window would be a very fun one. I know they were very active in the summer, which I actually think plays in their favor, but I think in the January window, if they're able to bring in defensive reinforcement, I think that would do them a lot of justice. Specifically a youngster in there, like you mentioned, it doesn't swing very well in terms of age in the back, which is not an issue. You obviously get a lot of experience, but sometimes you need that snappy movement that they particularly sometimes miss. Quickly, before we wrap up, because unfortunately we're going a little bit low on time here, but we saw an incredible scene in terms of crowd and atmosphere in there. Obviously, the Manchester Derby is held with the City side. Came very close to break it today, just not enough, probably because of the weather, the Manchester weather there. But the fan culture that City has created has been slowly but surely progressing. I think there's still a lot of room to improve and get to. And I think Arsenal are setting a great tutorial for other clubs in the WSL on how to get there. But from the traveling support that you saw, well, not really traveling, given it to Manchester, but the support that you saw for the blue side today and just the consistent crowds that they've been getting at home, how important is that for City and specifically seeing that change from the World Cup in the summer and the Euros of last year?
It's absolutely huge, not just for City, but any team, especially a women's team, to get that support, because historically they haven't had that support.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're feeling like, especially this City team, that there's people who believe in them. There's people who want to come out and see them, and they have something else to play for now. You know, obviously teams like Arsenal, Man United, women, some of these bigger names, City's obviously a little bit newer, but these other big linchpin tentpole teams, they have had bigger fan bases just naturally due to being in history.
Mm-hmm.
So now City are finally seeing that there's people who care about them, not that they didn't before, but a more loyal fan base. So obviously they're playing now for them, for their coaches, their managers, for the club, but they also are playing for all of these people who are now coming out to see them, for the young girls who believe that they can now be like Chloe Kelly, Lauren Hemp on the pitch and score a game winner, right? And I think that's really special. Fans are often called the 12th man because they're really have the ability to sway teams every which direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's only going to continue from here, not just for Manchester City, but for all of women's soccer, women's football. You know, I have a note here that today Man United sent an attendance record of 43,615 in attendance. That is amazing. We would not have seen that a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just for every single team out there, having more people, having more fans, it's the hope, it's the belief, and that's only going to take this sport much farther in the future.
It's exactly what we love to see when going to big stadiums. The men's stadiums, they're not always available, and often they're scheduling, clashes, or it's simply sometimes too expensive to actually host a game in that stadium. But when you see attendance like that, when you see turnout, that sends a statement to the club, and I guess a statement to the general game. Last question, maybe the easiest question. What color is Manchester?
Manchester is blue.
Manchester is blue for now until the two meet again, which is going to be a very fun rematch because United definitely don't want to lose another one, and City definitely cannot lose another game of the WSL.
Nope.
Julia, you cover plenty of the sport, plenty of Manchester City, like I mentioned. You write for Sportsnet, Toronto Star. You're writing everywhere. You're practically everywhere when anything is happening for Manchester City. Where can folks read up on everything that you're doing or watch sometimes what you're reporting?
Of course, I would probably say most active right now on my TikTok, which is at Julia Ranney. I post daily Manchester City women's and men's news on there, and both on my TikTok and my Instagram and my Twitter, all the same handle. I have a Linktree link in my bio that has links to all my published work, my website, my email. So if you ever want to get in touch, definitely join the conversation. Always happy to have some friendly banter as well. So don't hesitate to reach out.
I'll definitely be leaving Julia's Twitter and TikTok down below. And like you mentioned, the handle is exactly the same across, so you will definitely not be getting it messed up. Julia, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about how Manchester went blue.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll have to do more of these down the road.
We will, absolutely.